Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in to the 7th and final Spring 2023 update from GavsWeatherVids. So here we are, we've reached the end of our journey. We started spring updates in the beginning of the new year. We've been doing spring updates every week since early January. And wow, we've come to the end. So we've got one more update to do, this one. I've got Season Model Rounder to do on Saturday, and then 1 week today, next Sunday, we will be releasing the GWV Spring 2023 forecast. So, yeah, you know, it's been a ride, hasn't it? Been a journey. Hope you've enjoyed it, but still got this update to do, and I'll get on that for you in a moment. Just to say, that first video today was a 6 a.m. upload, and GavsWeatherVids Sunny Roundup is back later on today as well. It's going to be your eclectic mix of this and that, looking at things like sea surface temperature anomalies, solar activity, QBO, NEO, AO, SOI, MFI, I don't know, and the weather for the next 10 to 14 days and beyond as well. Goodness gracious me. So that's going to be an epic. It'll be released later on this afternoon. So if you could please like, share, subscribe on the video. Thank you so much everybody for doing that. Thank you so much to Richard for the amazing Spring 2023 updates gift. Amazing, Rich. Thank you so much, my friend. It's the final time you're going to see it. The threesome, Bumblebee, or Bee Bumble, and also Jerry, of course, Gerald, the little dog, and not to mention, Gerald the lamb, and not to mention Snowflake, the dog. So it's the final time you'll be seeing our threesome, but they will be appearing through this year, actually, because it's a bit of a bumper one, this with three sets of analogues to go through, so there will be plenty of the threesome in this video. Thank you so much to Richard for the spring updates gift. You're going to see the spring forecast gift, by the way, next week. Got a special gift just for the forecast, so you'll see that next Sunday. Thank you so much to Shryan as well. Thank you so much to Shryan Bruin for supplying us with the data for this one. Also, getting all of the years together for us. So thank you so much, Shryan, for that. Right, I think that's my intro done. Goodness gracious me, let's get on then with the 7th and final Spring 2023 update. Going to begin looking at analogues for ENSO. So this is the latest CFS-V2 forecast for region 3.4, central part of the equatorial Pacific Ocean. And see that landing is just about over now. So of course we have had a triple dip landing year. Winter 2022-2023 was the third landing year in succession. It looks like it's pretty much an end though now. So we've got our dates and monthly periods on the bottom of the chart. Temperature anomalous on the side. The all-important number is minus 0.5, half a degree below average, because when you're at or below that, then you are reaching landing threshold. When you are above that, then you're back to ENSO neutral. Where we are right now is, pretty much on that threshold, and by the time you get through to April, we're back entering into ENSO neutral. It's actually quite a rapid movement from landing into ENSO neutral through this spring, and actually going into a weak El Nino, which is quite unusual, but CFS-V2 going into a weak El Nino there through into the summer, actually. So for our first set of analogues, we're very simply going to be looking at landing years that very quickly transition into ENSO neutral, and possibly some of them go to El Nino. Right, so later on in the year. Right, so let's have a look at our first spring then. This is 1965, changing rapidly from El Nino to ENSO neutral. This is quite a cold and unsettled spring, with below average heights over to the east of the country, some blocking up north, and winds coming in quite a cold north or northeasterly direction. Our next spring, that includes a very cold March, I think, in 65. Our next spring is 1972. This is a wet, relatively mild spring, I think, with below average heights across much of Western Europe. So that's a very unsettled spring in 72. Then we've got 1976. This spring went rapidly from El Nino to ENSO neutral and then developed into El Nino very quickly through the summer and into the autumn. Long hot summer of 76 was going from Dingo to from Dingo to Dingo. So the spring here has high pressure towards northern parts of Scandinavia, low pressure across central and eastern Europe, high pressure out to the Atlantic. This is a very dry spring. Doesn't necessarily look so from the analogue, but it is a very dry spring and starts getting very warm in May of 76 in particular, setting up the long hot summer. Then we've got 1984. This is quite a warm spring as well, with high pressure tending to be over to the north of the country, low pressure to the south. A lot of easterly winds in the spring of 1984. Most unsettled in the south, driest in the north. We've got 1996. This is a cold spring that went rapidly from La Nina to ENSO neutral. So high pressure to the north in this spring, low pressure to the south, winds coming in from an easterly direction in the spring of 96. The thing with that is it's following a cold winter. Winter of 95, 96 was a proper cold winter. Easterly winds, Scandinavian highs and whatnot coming and going. And when you have that sort of pattern, it does tend to go on into the spring, so that's one to bear in mind about that. It does follow a genuinely cold winter. We got spring of 2001. This was bring to an end a triple dip La Nina, but started with 98-99, carried on to 90-90,000, and then went on 2000, 2001. And by the way, I think 76 was the end of a triple dip La Nina as well. So this one, it's quite a cold, wet spring in 2001 with lots of low pressure around the country, some blocking away to the northwest as well. So particularly cold and wet, like late March into early April. Quite a cold wintry spell then. Just generally quite a cold March, actually, 2001. And pretty grim sort of spring with the foot and mouth thing going on as well. Foot and mouth disaster got going in spring of 2001. And we've got 2009. This is bringing to an end a double dip La Nina for 2007, 8, and then 2008. 2009. This one rapidly transitioning into ENSO neutral through the spring, and then actually went on into El Nino through the second half of 2009. This was quite a warm spring with high pressure to the south and the east of the country, low pressure is away to the north and northwest. Summer wind is coming in from a southwesterly direction in the spring of 2009. And that's our last one. So putting all that together, this is how all Marches combined are looking when we're having a rapid transition from Nina to neutral. By the way, in the browser there it says Nino to neutral. That should be Nina, La Nina. I've got my O and my A mixed up, but we're not looking from Nino to neutral. We are looking from Nina to neutral. So don't be confused about that. These are relevant. Yeah, these are relevant. Yeah, don't worry about what's in the browser. Right, okay, so this is how all Marches combined are looking when we're going from La Nina to ENSO neutral very quickly. So you get high pressure around Scandinavia, low pressure to the south. A lot of these Marches could be quite cold by the look of it. They do have some cold potential. We've got 1996 in there. We've got 1965. We've got 2001 as well. There are milder Marches like 1976 in the mix, but overall favouring some high pressure towards Scandinavia there and easterly winds in March. Then April sort of reverts to a milder type pattern with high pressure ridging in from the Azores, and that potentially brings us quite a dryish and relatively mild or even quite warm April, I think, there. That high pressure from the Azores. Then May looks a little bit dodgy, so in May we tend to get low pressure setting up across the west of Europe, so we go into an unsettled May there, and then this is how all springs combined are looking when we're going from La Nina to ENSO neutral, and that tends to have low pressure across much of Western Europe, higher pressure is to the North Sea. So a relatively unsettled signal for these springs. But bear in mind there is a lot of intra-month variation going on there. Right, okay, we're going to bring you some provisional February or preliminary provisional February data next. Now we're a long way short of month's end, so this is also projected what we think is most likely to happen. So starting with CT, currently as I'm recording the video on the 17th of February, the central temperature is at 6.3, 2.5 degrees above the 61 to 90 average. Now we're thinking that the CT is probably going to come in somewhere like mid to high 5s, maybe low 6. So I've got quite a big margin of error with this. We're not sure how cold it's going to get in the final days of the month, so that make a big difference, you know, as to where the CT comes out at potentially. But we're going to look at springs following February's with a CT range of 5.5 to 6.5. So 5.5 degrees to 6.5 degrees above average. That is our range there. And yeah, hopefully we will come out somewhere in that sort of area. So starting with our first spring, following a February with a CT range of 5.5 to 6.5, it's a spring of 1966. This is quite an unsettled and wet spring with low pressure coming in from off the Atlantic, relatively mild with this spring, but quite unsettled. Our next spring, following a February CT range of 5.5 to 6.5, is the spring of 1974. This is a much drier spring with high pressure tending to be to our northeast and winds in from the east. Of course, spring is the most easterly of the 4 seasons on average, so you do tend to expect lots of easterly winds in the spring. I think that's just relatively dryish and quite mild or pleasant spring. We've got spring of 1980, which is another one actually that's not too bad. This one has quite a bit of high pressure again to the north. Low pressure tends to be more away to the south. Winds often coming in from an easterly direction. A lot of dry and pleasant weather in the spring of 1980s. Most unsettled in the south. I think there was a thundery May. Then we've got spring of 1989. Now this one looks very unsettled, but it doesn't tell you everything you need to know about this spring. So you'd look at that and think it's like a wet and westerly type spring. There's a lot of variation going on through this spring. So March of 1989 is relatively dry and mild, I think. And then we go into a cold and wet April. Actually a very cold April, and there is snow. There's more snow in April of 1989 than there is throughout the entire winter of 1988, 1989. And then after that, we go into like a very warm pattern in May. We have a hot summer in 1989. It's very extended as well. It starts as early as May and it goes all the way on into September. So a long, warm summer that year, and it begins in May of 1989, which is a warm, dry month. So this is one of those scenarios where the analogue there for the season doesn't really tell you very much about the season as a whole. Then we've got spring 1995, again, following that February CT range of 5.5 to 6.5. This one has below average heights away to our northeast, ridging in the Atlantic. This is a very dry spring. Again, in some ways, this doesn't say everything you need to know. Quite a cold March at times. You know, there are wintry outbreaks during March. There's quite a snowstorm where I am in Northampton, where a snowstorm early in March 1995. I think the night of the 2nd to the 3rd of March 1995 has quite a big snow then. April, relatively dry and often quite warm, but there is like a potent cold snap through the middle part of the month, and then we go into a very warm May, and we have, particularly in the first week of May, a real heat wave. So again, that doesn't tell you anything that you need to know about the season, but it is a very dry spring and relatively warm in 1995. But spring of 2000 looks like that. So high pressure away to our northwest, low pressure to our south-southwest. So quite an unsettled spring in 2000, and does have a cold and wet April in 2000 as well. 2007 is a very dry and warm first half to the spring, with lots of high pressure ridging in off the Atlantic into northern and western Europe. Low pressure is pushed away to the northwest, so we have a really dry and warm March and an equally dry and warm April. In 2007, April 2007, was the warmest on record until it was beaten by 2011. It all flips around in May 2007, which develops northern blocking and brings torrential rain and sets the scene for the rest of the summer of 2007. Then we have the spring of 2008, this one with high pressure blocking around Greenland and Iceland, low pressure to south, winds coming in from the east to northeast a lot of the time with this spring. So we have a long cold spell from the middle of March to the middle of April in 2008, like a 4-week cold spell. It follows a sudden stratospheric warming event, by the way, at the end of February. Interestingly, after that cold spell through like mid-March to mid-April, we go much warmer as we get into May. We start to see high pressure building and we have a very warm summer like May. Actually, the best of the summer is in May 2008. We've got 2011, which is a warm and dry spring, particularly focused on April, which is almost a summer-like month. Very, very warm April and very dry too. And then we've got 2014 with high pressure over to the east of the country. That's a really warm and relatively dry spring as well. We've got 2017, this is another one that's a pretty warm and dry spring with lots of high pressure across western parts of Europe. And then finally we've got 2020, which rounds off a run of very warm and dry springs there at the end. I'm sure you remember it's a lockdown spring of 2020, and day after day of warm blue skies and warm sunshine and blue skies. Right, let's put all that together then. This is how all Marches combined are looking following February CT range of 5.5 to 6.5. Generally quite mixed with low pressure in from off the Atlantic. Not a particularly cold signal with that, but just quite unsettled. This is how all Aprils combined are looking. Very different to March, with high pressure tend to be right in over top of the country. Very dry and warm signal for those Aprils. That's probably because it includes 2007 and 2011. But bear in mind, 2000 is a very wet April and quite a cold April as well. So, you know, there is variation to that. And then all Mays combined, this looks better than the first set for May, with high pressure tending to be across much of northern and west Europe. So that's a relatively dry and quite warm signal for the Mays, with high pressure over the country and winds coming up from the south. All springs combined for a February CT range of 5.5 to 6.5 looks like this. Tends to be quite anticyclonic signal, maybe a little bit surprisingly, given how we started off in the Marches. But, you know, April and May both have an anticyclonic signal. So a relatively dry and warm signal after an unsettled, mildish sort of March would be favoured there. And then we're on to the last set of analogues. So the final set for this 7th and final spring 2023 update, going to deal with England and Wales precipitation for February. Again, we're just projecting where we think we're most likely to end up. Has been exceptionally dry February so far. This is showing February rainfall provisional up to the 16th of February. And you can see that for this month so far, we have only had a very, very low 4.8 millimetres averaged out for England and Wales, which is only 7% of our average. And that's up to the 16th of February. Bear in mind, February is a shorter month as well, so it has less scope, you know, to make up the difference. You can see along here, but through most of February so far, the blue line, which is the daily accumulation, it's just flatlining away. At the end, it does kind of tick up a little bit and gets up to 7 millimetres or whatever it was, 4.8 millimetres, 7% of average. But I mean, that's really, really, really low. That's really low for February so far. And there's not much sign of any significant rain to come in the next week or so either. And so for the final set of analogues, we're going to be looking at springs following the top 10 driest Februaries since 1950. So we're unsure where in the top 10 we'll come in, but I'm pretty confident. We're pretty confident that we should come in somewhere within the top 10. So at number 10, we like a nice little countdown. Okay, pop pickers. Right, okay, so we like a countdown. Number 10, we've got the spring of 1964, following the 10th driest February. On record since 1950 anyway, and we tend to get high pressure with this spring up towards Scandinavia, low pressure to our south, so quite a dry spring I think here in 64, and winds coming in from the east. At number 9 we've got the spring of 2012 following the 9th driest February, so this is quite a dry spring as well. GWV Analog doesn't tell you everything you need to know, but we have a really dry, almost drought type March, then we flip on into a very wet and quite cold April in 2012, and then we get a very warm May, and again the best weather of the extended summer takes place in May of 2012 because the rest of the summer is is not great, to say the least. At number 8 we've got 1985. Spring 1985 looks quite cold and wet with low pressure across much of Western Europe, high pressure up towards Greenland and Iceland. Again, this both follows a cold winter. And as I say, when you get a really cold winter, very often that pattern will linger on into the spring. Not always, but very often. At number 7, the 7th driest of February is 1952. So the spring of 1952 tends to have quite a bit of northern blocking within high latitudes and winds coming in from the east. Has a famous snowstorm in late March of 1952. Then we have the spring of 1956. It's also following a cold winter. This is a relatively dry spring with high pressure reaching through the western and the north of Europe as well, so that's quite a dry and chilly spring I think there. We've got at number 5, 1998, the 5th driest February is 1998, which was a very, very summer-like February. I had a very summer-like spell middle part of the month. This is quite a cold, wet spring early on anyway, so March is unsettled and cool, then we have a really wet and cold April with a lot of late season snowfalls and flooding rains around Easter of 1998. We do make up for it though with a very warm summer like May. Again, May 1998 has the best weather of the extended summer. The rest of the summer of 1998 is pretty poor. At number 4, we've got 1986. This is a very wet and quite cold spring. Again, it follows on from a properly cold winter though. At number 3, we've got 1965 showing up again. So this again has a very cold March, quite a wintry March. The rest of the spring is pretty cool and wet, follows the 3rd driest February. And then at number 2, the 2nd driest February is 1993. The spring of 93 is actually quite dry and warm with high pressure up towards Scandinavia. The wind tends to be in from the east a lot of the time. So that's a dry and warm spring in 93. And then finally, the driest February, certainly since 1950, is 1959, and the spring of 1959 looks like that, again favouring high pressure towards Scandinavia, low pressure out to the west, winds often coming in from a southeasterly direction. This starts a very long and very warm summer. So, some way similar to 1989, really. The summer of 1959 is a very warm, often quite hot summer. It is very extended. It gets going through the spring and carries on into the autumn. And so, this is a relatively dry and warm spring that we have in 1959. Right, let's put all of that together then. Finally, let's have a look at all Marches combined, shall we? Following the top 10 driest Februaries. So March tending to favour high pressure over Scandinavia, winds coming in from the east. A lot of dry weather with those Marches. Could be cold, just depends on the exact orientation of the high pressure. It does favour high pressure over Scandinavia, which in March can sometimes deliver really quite cold weather. Other times, though, if the wind is more south of east, it'll be a relatively dry and warm March. This is how all Aprils combined are looking. Very different. Really wet signal for these Aprils. Very unsettled. Not necessarily that cold, but certainly a very unsettled signal for those Aprils following the top 10 driest February. So after dry February, you get a wet April, by the look of it, over time. And then May, we pick high pressure back up again. This is how all May's combined are looking. High pressure reappearing over to the east of the country, very dry weather and probably quite warm in the Mays. And then finally, this is how all Springs combined are looking following the top 10 driest Februaries. And, you know, again, it's an analogue, but doesn't necessarily tell you everything you need to know. It do favour high pressure or Scandinavia, particularly because what happens in March. At the same time, we have the low pressure over the UK and Western Europe. That's particularly because what happens in the April. So overall, you know, a mixed bag. But certainly April has the worst of it following those dry Februaries. Right, we're done. That's it then, everybody. That is the 7th and final Spring 2023 update. I hope you enjoyed it, everyone. What a journey it's been. We have now reached the end. Just got to see one roundup to do on Saturday. And then, as I say, we will be releasing our Spring 2023 forecast for you here at GavsWeatherVids next Sunday. Thank you so much to Richard, to Bumble, to Jerry, and to Snowdrop for the gift over the past few days. Thank you so much, Rich. And thanks so much to Shrine Brian for all of the help on this season of spring updates as well. And with all that said, for the 7th and final Spring 2023 update, that's all for now. And thanks so much.